Now call this meeting of the Civilian Review Board into order. Thank you all for the quorum. Hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to take a look at the minutes from our previous meeting. Does anyone have any additions, edits, or any other notes on the meeting? If not, I will entertain a motion to accept. Thank you. May I have a second, please? All in favor of accepting the minutes as written, please raise your hands. Perfect. All right, now I'll turn it over to the Inspector General for any updates.
Well, good afternoon. I just was going to just bring your attention to some few things. There was some information that the board had requested. So as you can see, the first top is the summary. Again, kind of goes over how many complaints we've received in this year, 2024. And then next to it, May just kind of breaks down how many we've actually received for each month. I won't go over all of that because you have the information in front of you if you have any questions. If you look at the next document we have, it's a little bit longer on the legal paper. So the board had asked if I could provide them with a little bit of the cases and the ones that have the sustained dispositions. So if you see in front of you, that's pretty much what you have. It's going to give you the cases. It tells you the date of the complaint, when it was closed. It tells you the type of offense that was being investigated. It'll give you a little brief summary, so I may just tell you the summary just is the kind of the allegation that actually we got from the complainant. It's a lot of information. If you reach over to the second page, you'll see that it'll tell you what the disposition was for the investigation. It tells you when it went before the board, what the board's vote was. It also tells you when it went over to CPD, the date we got it back from CPD. It tells you what CPD's disposition was on the report that they looked at, and it tells you the type of action that was taken. There are some IG notes. The notes are really for us because what we're tracking is, one, there are cases that we had gotten back, ones we didn't get back. There might be some additional information that we may be looking, but this again was some of the information that the board had asked. This is only 2022 going to 2023. If you see some blank spots, that's because we did send the memo out to the chief, and we're still just waiting to get some of that information back. But if there's any questions, please feel free, to reach out, send me an email or anything, and we're able to provide you with some answers.
Inspector General, could you explain what positive corrective action means?
So positive corrective action, based on what the contract, that could be anything from verbal counseling or just them sitting and having a talk with the person. If it's more of a documented constructive counseling, okay, I'll take you back. You asked what it was, and I think I was looking at the positive corrective action, which is normally verbal. And then anything other than that documented constructive counseling would just be that it's documented.
So I'm looking at the page 2. So we have the board disposition that's sustained, and then the CPD COC disposition is also sustained. Do you know how many total that the board and the CPD disposition have been sustained, like completely?
I would have to look back. I know that when we did the yearly, we gave all of the totals to kind of do the comparison there. So we did have the tables on that, and we can actually, if you don't have a copy of that, we could probably forward that again. But I know we kind of broke it down a little bit more so we could, see what the totals were.
Annual report?
The annual report, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I have that. Thanks.
Okay.
Are there any additional questions for the Inspector General?
I have one question. So, it's I'm trying to read through some of these. So positive corrective action, we're not going to know the specific of what that was. It could be verbal, or is there a way to know what specifically was done? Or is that something that we just aren't going to know?
What we can do is, although the reports that are listed here, we actually have the document and we have the feedback that came back from CPD. So if there's a specific case in which the board is interested that you want to see specifically what was done, if you want to email us that, we can do that and just email that report to you. But everything listed, we kind of get the reports back, we get it back, we put down whatever the information is. Most of the time, positive corrective action is verbal.
Okay, so you would know, though, if the officer was given classes, remedial classes to take, or something to that effect? If we got back to you, so let's say we took this home, reviewed it, and then got back to you with some specifics after we had an opportunity to review it, then you would be able to find out if remedial classes were, if something else was done?
Yeah, we would. I know that usually the information that we put in our spreadsheet, if it's something like a class or something specifically, we usually put a little footnote in there. And if it's not, then we would just have to pull the report to look. But again, we have all of that information, so if it's anything that the board wants to review, just let us know, and we can definitely just shoot that information to you.
Okay.
Any additional questions for the Inspector General?
I got one more question, and it's regarding the notes here. So there is one case here that the board disposition is sustained. It looks like the CBD disposition is not sustained. Then there's no further action in terms of the corrective action. And then the notes say COC disagreed because the officer was not interviewed.
So again, would be their finding. Sometimes they agree, sometimes they don't agree. One of the things I can say that we're trying to do is, as we are gathering all of this information, is we're trying to go back through and see if some of the things that was disagreed, and maybe have a meeting with CPD just to have a discussion. The notes here are just brief notes. A lot of times when we look at everything, we look specifically at what CPD says as to why they agree, disagree. It doesn't necessarily mean that our findings, as we said, that they violated a policy or procedure, that they're going to agree or disagree. And again, we always put a recommendation for whether or not disciplinary action occur. Since we're not the disciplinary agency, it's still up to CPD. But I think we would like to do a follow-up just to make sure, hey, why is it that, you guys didn't take some action, so. And again, if there's a question like the question you have here, if it's something that you want us to follow up with CPD to just kind of get a little bit more of a feedback, we can definitely do that. And I will say the information that we do get back from CPD, they usually have a little bit more information on there. The notes we put here is just kind of giving us a little bit of a reference. So when we look at it, we can just make sure it's not something that we are really strongly concerned about.
So, I'm trying to find, some of it I just don't understand the consistency between, so maybe we can just point to a few, and perhaps you can help me to interpret this spreadsheet. So, on the third page here, let's see, it's like case number 2022-0239. So we have, oh, I'm sorry, no. Let me find a better one, example. Oh, I see, the deal. I'll just pause that. I was misreading the board disposition. All right.
I think the only other question that I have is as it relates to the discrepancies between the board disposition and the CPD dispositions. IG Hendricks, do you know, or have you or anyone from your office met with CPD to get a better idea of what they are looking for in terms of how they come to the conclusions for their disposition in comparison to you all in your office? Because I know we all focus on policies, but I am curious what the broader picture that they are focusing on as it pertains to their review of these investigations.
So what I'll say, I know we had a meeting with CPD in the beginning, and so, this again is still, a process and training. So what I do know is in the beginning, some of our findings and CPD's findings were a little bit different, and we did change some things. So, for example, when it came to excessive use of force, when we looked at the allegation initially was that the force that was used was excessive. We found that the force that was used was within policy, and so initially we were closing those cases as exonerated. When we ended up meeting with CPD, they was explaining that they didn't understand being exonerated because it's like we were exonerating excessive use of force. So we changed ours from being exonerated to unfounded because we basically found that the officer's actions was in policy, but the allegation of excessive use of force was unfounded. So what I'll say is as we're looking at this, keep in mind that the cases in 2022 and as we get into 2023, there may be some changes as to how we were reporting unfounded versus exonerated, but we're trying to make sure that we are looking at things and being consistent. One of the other things when I met with CPD is we also look exactly at what the allegation is. So for example, if a complainant states that the officer said such and such and their allegation is that it was rude and discourteous, what we may find is that the officer actually did say that, but it wasn't that it was rude, because we did have a case in which the officer was trying to make a determination based on the run, whether the person that they were investigating was having a inner physical relationship with a boyfriend, or whether it was more or less, paid for service. So they were asking specific questions of the young lady, and the young lady felt that the questions were rude. So our finding was, yes, they did ask these questions, and we exonerated the officer, but the questions were not rude. So that was something that CPD, when they looked at it, they felt, oh, well, for us, it would have just been unfounded because the allegation on itself, they felt, was not a violation of policy. So we were still trying to kind of work some of those things out. And so that's why, what I will say is if there's any case here specifically that a board member has a question about, it would be something like just follow up with us, because we can actually pull the report and it will say specifically why, if they disagree, why they disagree. And some of the things that we read, okay, we kind of understood what they were saying. It wasn't that they were saying that the officer violated a policy or didn't violate a policy. So we did focus more on, and I hope I'm not getting long-winded, as whether or not when we say that the officer's action violated a policy, we really focus on whether or not CPD agreed with us as to whether or not that officer's action violated a policy or not.
Thank you.
So one of the cases would be, let me find it here. Yeah. 2022-239. So this was one of the cases where an officer walked the homeowners outside naked and we raised a question regarding that case about the reasonableness of the officer's actions, that they didn't clothe the complainant and publicly shamed her, put her in the back of a police car, and then took her out unclothed. And in this case, while there wasn't a specific policy, we said that their officers' actions were unreasonable, and we asked a question about the work rule, if you'll recall, in that case. No action was taken, and I think we even made a policy recommendation, a policy change recommendation in that case, asking whether, in the case of an unclothed suspect, if there could be some change so that the officer had a duty to protect the dignity of the complainants. All I see here is no action taken. So how do we follow up there in terms of, our recommendation, our policy just went into the ether. So
what I will say is, on that specific case, we always look at whether or not the actions that were taken by the officer violated a policy. And I know that the board in the past has recommended that maybe policies either be looked at or reviewed, and that could be something going forward, that if the board has something specifically in a policy.
In that case. So
Right.
in that case, we made a recommendation that the policy be changed, that unclothed suspects be clothed, especially when they're found in their own homes. It just seemed common sense. It was just reasonable for the officer to throw a blanket on this woman and not walk her outside. She was handcuffed to the fence and then put in the back of a police car. The whole activity seemed completely unreasonable. So we made a recommendation for policy change. There's nothing here. How will we find out if that was heard, processed, either accepted or rejected? How will that happen?
Chairmember Nathan, and I'm going to ask Rob to weigh in on this as well. Here's what I think you could do, because it is actually a board recommendation and not necessarily a recommendation for policy change from the IG. It may make the most sense for the board to draft follow-ups for all of the policy recommendations that were made, to see if there are responses as to progress toward a policy change or any further discussion that the board could have with CPD with regard to your policy recommendations.
I don't know if any of the board members are keeping track of all of these recommendations. We orally say them in the course of a meeting.
I think Stephanie has all of them.
And we have those collected. So then we would need to draft a letter on each of the policy recommendations. Is that what we're saying?
I mean, I'm looking up the code real quick, but it could be, just a one-pager, basically. We create a template for it and just do it that way. Anytime there's a request for an update on a recommendation that was made related to a policy change.
Well, I certainly would love to see us do that. I just didn't know that that was the mechanics of, I think we've asked this question before on a number of occasions about what happens to our policy recommendations. So.
Thank you, Ms. Ross, for giving us that answer, because I do think that has come up several times, and it just kind of hangs there. Now, we do have Chief Bryant, or at least a representative coming, the chief coming next month. So I feel like if there's anything in addition to a letter that she'd prefer to get instead of, if there's some other process, I think we would like an ongoing update of what those policy recommendations are, since those are separate from the cases, but.
And I think it makes sense. I mean, the IG obviously has the resources here that can do that. So if the board wants to request of the Department of Inspector General that if there are policy recommendations that the board makes in addition to a finding, that we also get follow-up from CPD on that policy recommendation. I'm sure you can do it that way as well, for sure.
That multiple times, maybe we're just not getting the handoff real clear, because we have, this has come up repeatedly. And, you know, a follow-up for the policy recommendations, but now we're seeing that there's nothing here, so.
There's obviously a bifurcation of duties and responsibilities, right? And so I agree in the general sense that the board could direct the IG to get in touch with the police and find out what the status is. But from a formality standpoint, I think it has more weight and effect if the board is the one making the recommendations related to these policies, that through the administrative staff, just, again, I'm happy to help create the template for that.
That'd be great.
And then it's just a one-pager saying, on this complaint number, here's what was recommended. This is a formal request to find out what the status is of the
Well,
recommendation.
So would it make sense then
Please
for
report back to the
Stephanie to
I've already
write
sent
to our
Stephanie an
chairperson?
email
Good.
and said, could you draft a template, and we will essentially plug in each recommendation to the template. I can sign those, Stephanie can forward those to the
Yeah, we
chief for
just
each
put it on
one.
board letterhead, and, yeah, I mean, if I need to put my signature on it too to give it a little more weight, I mean, whatever we
That'd be
need.
great.
And then, but with instruction inside the letter to report back to the chair or to Stephanie, yeah.
Thank you.
And we could even put, I mean, we can't force them to, but we can even put a time frame in there saying, we would appreciate a reply within X number of days or something. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Great idea.
Madam Chair. And one thing I really wanted to add to the board is that some of the recommendations that are being made for policy, one of the things that I think is important when we're making recommendations is to maybe do some research to find out maybe what other law enforcement agencies, same size, same city size, that may have maybe a similar issue, maybe how that suggests, because I know it's okay to say, you know, we want to make a recommendation that the police review something, but them reviewing it and us maybe giving them a little bit more detail as to saying, hey, we've looked, this is what some of the other agencies have done to maybe rectify that or update that. I think that helps the chief also. So it's not like we're making a recommendation for her and we're relying on her strictly to give that to her people to make sure that they do a research. So I would say, you know, I would love the opportunity if we're able to keep track of some of what the recommendations are, to know specifically what is the area that the board is saying about the policy that they would like to see maybe updated, especially now since we have our management analysts, because that's something that they can research and add a little bit more creed to that recommendation versus just, you know, a follow-up.
I'm going to toss a question back to Tiara. Do you know, like, when the board makes a recommendation to the police for some policy change, does Furby get involved with that? Will they reach out to Furby, or you're not sure?
I'm sure they will, if the policy change has legal ramifications to determine whether or not they can change the policy. I am unsure of whether or not there has been discussion at all amongst the chain of command with regard to the board's policy recommendations. But generally speaking, when there is a policy change, a directive change, Furby is involved.
You know, whether Furby might have law clerks and whether we want
Absolutely,
to put the
yeah.
onus on them to do this type of research that the IG was talking about, or whether it's something should be more in-house, like with me doing it. Because ultimately it'll go
Probably
through
makes
Furby.
sense for CPD to do it through Furby and his clerks.
Right. I just feel like they're not going to do it unless we recommend or ask them to do it.
Correct. You should, we'll talk offline about how we can work through our internal stuff.
Any other questions for the Inspector General?
Yes. I have a question regarding the cases. For example, one of them is 2023-0359. There were a series of cases where the officers were not, they were refusing to wear masks while in the hospital. And I remember one specifically where the officer, I don't know if it was University Hospital, was very disrespectful to the nurses. And what it says here is corrective action. It's all pink, and it says DIG following up on this allegation. Does this just mean that that CPD has not gotten back to you and within this time period, or what does that mean?
I would have to, I'm trying to find,
It's on, let's see here, it's, the case number, one of them is 2023-0359.
I see 2023-0359. I do see, I'm just not able to see the second page. Okay, here, okay, it was stuck together. Okay, so I don't see if it's 2023-0359, so there's nothing there, so that means we haven't received anything back from the chain of command. And so there were some reports that we have not received back that we did send a memo out, and they're steadily coming in. So this that you see is just a spreadsheet. When it says DIG following up on this allegation, means that, you know, we sent the memo out listing some of the reports that were past 60 days that past 6 months, that we hadn't gotten any follow-up. So we just kind of sent the memo up to say we were still waiting. And those are still coming in. So once they come in,
So
we'll
we'll
be
see
updated.
this
Yeah,
sooner or later?
yes.
Okay, tk you.
And when there's positive corrective action, that's a oral correction, does that go in the officer's file? So that's marked on the officer's record that he or she received oral correction?
Yes.
Okay. But that is then removed according to the collective bargaining agreement within some specified time period?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Stephanie, if I may just make a recommendation if we do this again, just adding page numbers is probably easier to navigate if we have some page numbers to refer to. Thank you.
Poor Stephanie's gotten 4 emails
I
from me
know.
already this meeting.
Stephanie, do everything.
All right. If there are no further questions, thank you, Inspector General, for the case updates and for providing these materials. Stephanie, if they haven't been sent out already, could you make sure these get emailed to the board members who are not present today? Thank you. Before we get into cases, I'd like to take a moment and recognize Ms. Crystal Jackson, who is our newest board member. Mr. Tobias, would you like to give any updates on the status of where Ms. Jackson is in terms of her training, swearing in, eligibility, those sorts of
Well,
things?
I'm going to give all the credit to Ms. Brock over here because she's the one doing the heavy lifting. It's my I'm just reporting the news.
Yes.
It's my understanding that everything's been completed except the ride-along, which will be taking place tomorrow afternoon. So I've already sent some emails myself about making sure that we have her sworn in right before the meeting in July.
Welcome, Ms. Jackson. We appreciate your willingness to serve and can't wait to have you at the table with us next month. If she wants to. Would you like to make any statements or any presentation of any sort?
Introductions or?
No, actually, I'm just really happy to be come on board, to be a part of this board. Very excited, like I said, to be a part of it and give my input every way that I can. So.
Thank you. We'll have you ready to go and join committees as soon as you're sworn in.
And I guess in theory, if we finish the ride-along tomorrow, we could probably get her sworn in the next day, you know, and that way, if you want to try to assign cases to have reviewed for the July meeting.
Yeah, that
so
would be
just
great.
get- Good.
Yes.
So just get in touch with me and we can do that, yeah. Yeah. Even better.
That would be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
We'll work together to get you sworn in as soon as possible.
You going on vacation, Mr. Tobias? Nice, very nice. All
I got
right.
Plenty of weeks I need to use them or I lose them.
Turning now to case reviews. Dr. Ford, do you have the cases from your subcommittee from the previous month?
I do.
That we could start? Perfect. Turn it over to you then.
The first case is case number 2023-1883. On December 15th, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus Department of TIG alleging a policeman's conduct by a Columbus police officer. The complainant reported on December 11th, 2023, she and her daughter were in her vehicle, and while pulling away from the curb, she almost hit a passing patrol car. The complainant reported she was stopped by the officer, who found during the stop that her driver's license was suspended and found a BB gun in the back seat of her vehicle. The complainant stated that she and her 14-year-old daughter were searched and placed in handcuffs. The complainant alleged, number one, 2 male officers placed her minor daughter in handcuffs and searched her minor daughter instead of having a female officer do the search. The complainant also alleged, number 2, her wrists were injured by the handcuffs, and when she told the officer the handcuffs were hurting, the officer told her the handcuffs were about to come off and did not adjust the handcuffs. The Columbus DIG investigation consisted of a review of a body-worn camera, computer-aided dispatch information, a statement from a focus officer, a telephone interview of the complainant, and a review of applicable CPD directives. Pertaining to allegation 1, when the officer saw what looked to be a weapon in the backseat of the vehicle, the complainant's daughter was removed from the vehicle, handcuffed, and both of her arms and waist were checked for weapons by one officer, not 2 officers, and the check was just a pat-down, not a search, as reported by the complainant. The incident did not occur as alleged by the complainant, therefore it is recommended the allegation 1 be closed with a finding of unfounded. Pertaining to allegation 2, the Columbus DIG did not receive any additional information from the complainant to validate her alleged injuries. The investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complaint's allegation of her physical injuries to her wrist. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 2 be closed as a finding of unfounded. Additionally, while reviewing BWC footage, the Columbus DIG did observe a focus officer use profanity and exhibit unprofessional behavior when he stated, "You almost ran me into the effing grass," to the complainant. The officer's language towards the complainant is a violation of CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that this DIG allegation be closed with a finding of a sustained. So, conclusion, allegation 1, the complainant alleged 2 male officers searched and placed her daughter in handcuffs instead of a female officer. When the officer looked to see what was the weapon in the backseat of the vehicle, the complainant's daughter was removed from the vehicle, handcuffed. While both her arms and her waist were checked for weapons by one officer, not 2, the check was a pat-down, not a search. The incident did not happen as alleged by the complainant. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 1 be closed with a finding of unfounded. Allegation 2, the complainant alleged her wrists were injured by handcuffs when she told the officers the handcuffs were hurting. The officer told her she was about to be released. The investigation revealed the complainant asked the officer to adjust the handcuffs, and the officer acknowledged the complainant's request by advising her handcuffs are about to come off. The handcuffs were removed 18 minutes later. The complainant stated she went to the hospital about her wrist being injured as a result of that being handcuffed. The complainant was asked to provide documentation to the Columbus DIG regarding her wrist injuries. However, the complainant provided no documentation to validate this allegation. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation number 2 be closed with a finding unfounded, as the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation of physical injuries to her wrists as a result of being handcuffed. The officer's violations did not violate CPD policy. Do you want me to keep this separate from the DIG? Okay, so our committee did review this case and agree with the findings of the Inspector General, and we move for approval.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you.
Then we have the DIG additional finding on this. After review of BWC footage, the investigation found the focus officer used profanity and exhibited unprofessional behavior in his response. Quote, "You almost ran me into the effing grass," unquote, to the complainant. The officer's response and actions towards the complainant is a violation of CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be sustained against this officer. And our committee, again, reviewed this case and agree with the Inspector General findings and move for approval.
May I have a second, please? Thank you. We'll save votes for until the subcommittee 2 is done.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is DIG complaint number 2023-1892. On December 18th, 2023, the City of Columbus Department Inspector General received a complaint alleging misconduct by Columbus Division of Police officers via the DIG hotline. The complainant alleged officers put handcuffs on her too tight, and the officers would not loosen them. The Columbus DIG's investigation consisted of a review of a body-worn camera, computer dispatch, unit history, documentation received from the CPD Internal Affairs Bureau, and an interview with the complainant. The investigation revealed the officers responded to an unknown complaint run, and the complainant was pink-slipped due to mental health conditions. The complainant was handcuffed to be transported to the hospital by the assistance of 2 officers, and while being handcuffed, the complainant could be heard saying, quote, "ow," via BWC. One officer informed the complainant that constantly moving her arms would cause the handcuffs to hurt. The complainant did not at any time tell the officers that the handcuffs were too tight or ask that the handcuffs be loosened. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed as unfounded, as the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complaint's allegation. The officer's allegations were within CPD policy. The conclusion is that allegation number one, the investigation revealed officers L and M responded to an unknown complaint run, and the complainant was pink-slipped due to mental health concerns. She was handcuffed to be transported to the hospital with the assistance of both officers, and while being handcuffed, she could be heard saying, quote, ow, via BWC. Officer L informed the complainant that constantly moving her arms would cause handcuffs to hurt. The complainant did not at any time tell the officers the handcuffs were tight or ask they be loosened. Therefore, it's recommended this allegation be closed as unfounded, as the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. And the officer's actions were within CPD policy. And again, our committee reviewed this case and agreed with the Inspector General's evaluation, and we move for approval.
May I have a second, please?
Okay. This is complaint number 2023-1923. On December 26, 2023, a complaint was received by the City of Columbus Department of Inspector General alleging misconduct by Columbus Division of Police officer. The complainant alleged on December 24, 2023, at approximately 3 a.m., she called 911 for assistance as there was a medical emergency involving her son hitting his head. The complainant advised that when the ambulance arrived, the medics had her son in the ambulance and administered Narcan to her child, as they believed the child had ingested an illegal substance. This upset the complainant because her son did not ingest drugs of any kind. She was removed from the ambulance, and the complainant made the following allegations. Number one, that the CPD officer manhandled her, was very rough and aggressive, and then slammed her to the ground. Number two, the CPD officer broke her cell phone. And number three, the CPD officer screamed at her, and said, quote, shut the F up, end quote. The investigation consisted of interviews with the complainant, the focus officer, a review of the body-worn camera footage, CPD use of force report, and a review of CPD policies and procedures. In allegation one, the investigation revealed the officer used force to remove the complainant from the ambulance, as the medics requested that she be removed due to her agitated state. The officer's actions were not found to be excessive and were within CPD policy and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation B1 be closed with finding unfounded. In allegation 2, the investigation found no evidence to corroborate the complainant's allegation that the officer's actions damaged her cell phone screen. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed with finding of unfounded. In allegation 3, the investigation found no evidence that the officer screamed at the complainant, quote, shut the F up, end quote. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed with finding unfounded. So for conclusion, allegation 1, the complainant alleged officer manhandled her, was rough, aggressive, and slammed her to the ground. A review of the body-worn camera showed Officer W and a medic pick up the complainant and physically removed her from the ambulance. The complainant was then placed safely on the ground away from the ambulance. The investigation found no evidence to substantiate that the allegations' actions occurred as stated by the complainant. The officer's use of force to remove the complainant from the ambulance was not found to be excessive and was within CPD policy. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed as unfounded. Allegation 2, the complainant alleged the officer broke her cell phone. The investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. A review of the BWC footage shows the complainant talking on her cell phone when she picked it up and removed from the ambulance, then placed safely on the ground, and she continually held her phone and continued her conversation. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed as unfounded. Finally, allegation 3, the complainant alleged the officer screamed at her and told her to, quote, shut the F up, end quote. Based on the information and evidence obtained, the investigation found no evidence of that. The officer screamed at her and said, quote, shut the F up, end quote. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation of rude or discourteous profanity be closed as unfounded. Our committee number 2 reviewed this case as well and agree with the DIG's conclusions, and we move for approval.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, this is case 2024-0006. On January 2nd, 2024, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus DIG alleging misconduct by a Columbus police officer. The complainant made 2 allegations. Number 1, she alleged the officer used excessive force in how he grabbed her when he took her to the police cruiser. And number 2, patted her down after she advised him that she wanted a female officer to pat her down. The Columbus DIG investigation consisted of a review of body-worn camera data, a review of computer-aided dispatch information, a telephone interview of the complainant, and a review of the applicable Columbus Police Division directives. The investigation found the officer's actions during the traffic stop were supported by CPD policy or procedure. Also, the investigation found no evidence that the officer used any force as alleged by the complainant when she was escorted to the police cruiser. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as unfounded. In regards to the allegation the officer patted her down after she advised him that she wanted a female officer to pat her down, the investigation found no evidence that this pat down occurred. Therefore, it is recommendation this allegation also be closed as unfounded. So concluding, allegation 1, the complainant alleged that Officer B used excessive force in how he grabbed her when he took her to this police cruiser. Based on the information and evidence, the investigation found no evidence that substantiated that complaint. At no point did Officer B use any force against the complainant. Therefore, the DIG recommends this allegation against Officer B be closed as unfounded. Allegation number 2, the complainant alleged Officer B patted her down after she advised him that she wanted a female officer to pat her down. Based on information and evidence, the investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. At no point did Officer B conduct a pat down of Ms. Greathouse, or the complainant. The complainant of the Columbus DIG recommends this allegation against Officer B be closed as unfounded. And again, our committee number 2 reviewed this complaint and agree with the findings of the Inspector General and move for approval.
May I have a second, please?
In complaint number 2024-0055 on January 11th, 2024, the City of Columbus Department Inspector General received a complaint of misconduct via the DIG hotline. The complainant alleged his camera went missing after his vehicle was impounded by a Columbus police officer from an incident which occurred on January 1st, 2024, relating to police report. The Columbus DIG investigation consists of a review of computer dispatch, unit history, property sheet summary, impounded vehicle inventory, body-worn camera data, applicable Columbus Division of Police directives, an interview with the complainant, and an interview with the officer. The investigation revealed during the inventory of the vehicle, an officer found the camera, listed it on the inventory sheet, and checked this item, and this checked item remained in the vehicle. As this is a violation of CPD directive, it is recommended this allegation be closed as sustained.
Sorry.
That's okay, I'm getting there. Hold that thought. For conclusion, the complainant alleged his camera went missing after his vehicle was impounded from an incident which occurred on January 1st, 2024, relating to report number 240000734. The investigation revealed the complainant's camera, which should have been considered of high value, as it was valued around $519, was left in the complainant's vehicle when impounded by Sergeant F. Sergeant F did not remove the camera to secure it for safekeeping, and his actions are a violation of CPD policy. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed as sustained. And our committee reviewed the DIG's findings and moved for approval.
Second.
Thank you.
Our last one from our tabled meetings here, this is complaint number 2024-0075. On January 16th, 2024, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus Department Inspector General alleging misconduct by a Columbus police officer. The complaint stemmed from the officer purchasing an age-restricted product at a gas station convenience store when the cashier requested the officer's license to be scanned. The complainant alleged the officer gave her employee a hard time when purchasing an age-restricted product and said it was not okay for the officer to put employees in a situation where they are bullied because he is a police officer. The Columbus DIG's investigation consisted of an interview with the complainant, an interview with 2 witnesses, an interview with the police officer involved, a review of surveillance footage from the incident, and a review of applicable CPD directives. The investigation found the Columbus police officer was not in violation of any CPD directive due to the officer's actions of complying within the store's request to scan his license. Additionally, the officer was observed to not have engaged in bullying behavior towards the store employee at the time of the incident. Therefore, the Columbus DIG requests this allegation of the officer be closed as unfounded. And our conclusion is allegation number 1, the complainant alleged the officer gave her employee a hard time when purchasing an age-restricted product and said it was not okay for the officer to put her employees in a situation where they are bullied because he is a police officer. Based on all the involved parties' statements and evidence obtained, the investigation found the officer did not engage in any bullying behavior towards the store employees at the time of the incident. The officer did engage in conversation with the store employees and expressed his opinion in the matter of scanning of his license. However, this expression of opinion was not in violation of any CPD directive, policy, or procedure. Therefore, based upon the evidence and statements obtained, Officer P did not appear to use or attempt to use his position as a CPD officer to his advantage. Officer P presented the store with his license when he was requested to do so. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends this allegation against Officer P be closed as unfounded. And our committee number 2 reviewed this complaint as well and agree with the findings of the DIG, and I move for approval.
May I have a second? Second. Any questions?
Not about that case, but just, I think it's 0055.
Okay. A question on 0055.
So do we know if it's just the camera is gone and that's it? Or is there anything going to be done to rectify that? Do you know?
I don't know.
Are you asking if the car was secured, or what?
No, I said what was going to be done to rectify the loss of the camera.
Oh, okay.
And I don't think we have an answer for that.
I don't.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll have to look into that, but I believe most of the time, if there's something that is damaged by CPD, the people have to file like a claim with the city to be reimbursed for it. So I would have to look to see if that's something that we had advised. I think the investigation just found that the officer was responsible for making sure any of the valuables based on CPD policy should be secured, and they didn't. But I would have to check just to tell you if there was a follow-up to advise the complainant what he would have to do to try to be reimbursed.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions regarding? Okay, we've got open motions on case number 2023-1883, plus an open motion on a separate allegation from the IG in that case. We've got an open motion on case number 2023-1892, 2023-1923, 2024-006, 2024-0055, and 2024-0075. All in favor of accepting those recommendations as given and motions, please raise your hands. All right, motions carry. Thank you, Dr. Ford. All right, turning it over now to Pastor Nathan for Committee 1.
Okay, this is case 2023-0235. Complainant alleged that a CPD officer assaulted them, their complainants alleged that a CPD officer assaulted them at a restaurant in February of 2023. The CPD officer was dating the soon-to-be ex-wife of one of the complainants. CPD officer became offended by something that was said and sucker punched one of the complainants in the restaurant. Then, after seeing the other complainant in the restaurant's parking lot, the officer proceeded to sucker punch him as well. The officer later pled guilty to a fourth-degree misdemeanor disorderly conduct charge and had a first-degree misdemeanor assault charge dismissed. The DIG sustained the complainant's allegations of misconduct, and we agree, and so we move to sustain the DIG's conclusion of officer misconduct in 2023-0235.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions?
This is case number 2024-0045. The complainant alleged that two CPD officers who were looking for a wanted felon that threatened to have who were looking for a wanted felon threatened to have the complainant evicted if he didn't let the officers search his home despite their lack of a warrant. Despite the complainant's refusal to let the officers into his home, they kept pounding on the door and kept threatening him with eviction unless he let them in. Regarding two of the officers, the DIG found evidence to sustain the allegation of misconduct due to their threats of eviction and their warrantless search. we agreed with the DIG's finding of police misconduct and move in case 2024-0045 to sustain the finding of misconduct.
Is there a second? Any questions?
There's also an additional allegation. The DIG added one of their own allegations regarding one of the officers. There was no finding of threats by him, but he did participate in the warrantless search. We agree with the DIG's finding and move to sustain the DIG's finding regarding one of this, with this additional finding of misconduct with respect to the other officer.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
This is case 2024-0118. The complainant alleged that the CPD officer used excessive force on her at Linda McKinley STEM Academy. The complainant was the sister of a student who had threatened school staff, and including the school secretary and the assistant principal. The complainant was the, as I said, was the sister of the student who had threatened this school staff. She came in response to her brother's call. The school, at the same time, coincidentally, was on lockdown due to a separate incident involving a fight between adults outside the school. The complainant was told that she needed to leave because the school was on lockdown. She refused and pounded on the school door and shouted at the officer and the school staff. She then came back and was told that she was trespassing and would be arrested. She proceeded to try to run away and became combative when the officer tried to handcuff her. The actions that the DIG found that the actions the officer took were within CPD policy and concluded that the complaint against the officer for excessive force was unfounded. We agree. And so in case number 2024-0018, we move to accept the DIG's finding of unfounded with respect to the allegation of excessive use of force.
May I have a second? Thank you. Any questions?
This is case 2024-0201. The complainant alleged excessive use of force by CPD officers. The CPD was called by the mother of the complainant, the mother of the complainant's children, who alleged that the complainant had a gun and had pulled it on her. CPD arrived at the home and tried to pat the complainant down. He became combative and refused to comply. One of the officers threatened to tase him. He went to the ground and refused to let them complete the pat-down. They were finally able to handcuff him despite repeated requests of the complainant to stand and walk to the officer's car. He refused to stand, and so they had to attempt to carry him. He finally walked on his own. The DIG concluded that the CPD had a well-founded belief that the complainant had a weapon and that the attempted pat-down was therefore reasonable. They also concluded that the allegation of the officer should be closed with a of officer misconduct should be closed with a finding of unfounded. We agreed, and therefore we move in case 2024-0201 to accept the DIG's finding of unfounded with respect to officer misconduct.
May I have a second, please? Second. Any questions?
And in this case, I think if I might ask the DIG, or perhaps Dr. Jones, did we get report that the DIG was unable to get medical records due to the complainant's lack of cooperation. Is that what happened in case 2024-0201? Just. So we asked for medical records, but they just simply,
We weren't able to obtain them.
okay, so, all right. Case 2024-0209, the complainant alleged that she was pushed over by a CPD officer who did not explain, I'm sorry, not pushed over, pulled over, by a CPD officer who didn't explain why she was pulled over and would not identify himself. Body-worn camera evidence showed the contrary, that the officers did explain why she was being pulled over, because she was driving 80 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone, and that the officer's name and badge number was on the ticket, and she never asked the officer's name. The DIG concluded that the allegations against the officer should be dismissed as unfounded. We agreed with the DIG's finding, and so I move in case 2024-0209 to accept the DIG's finding of unfounded with respect to officer misconduct in the case of, in this case.
Any second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions?
This is case 2024-0215. The complainant alleged that the officer who was working special duty in front of the Schottenstein Center directed traffic improperly, caused him to get in an accident. There was no body-worn camera evidence. Again, this is another instance of special duty officer not wearing body-worn camera, so we'll make a recommendation at the end of this case. The complainant says the CPD officer kept yelling and waving him left and yelled left lane. When he completed the turn, he collided with another car in that lane. The officer claimed that he told him to turn well before this and that the accident was due to the complainant's own negligence and not due to the officer's directions. Without more evidence, the DIG dismissed this finding as unfounded. We agree with the DIG's finding of unfounded concerning officer misconduct in case 2024-0215 and move to accept the DIG's finding, but then I'll make a separate recommendation.
Okay, may I have a second? Any questions?
And so we wanted to add the recommendation again. This is, I don't know how many times we've said the same thing, but we're recommending as a board that we change the policy of having no body-worn cameras on special duty officers, because we're simply unable to obtain the evidence needed to investigate these cases of alleged police misconduct with special duty officers.
May I have a second on that, please?
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, this is case 2024-0333. A dispute arose between the complainant, who was a dispatcher for the CPD, and another dispatcher at CPD. The complainant filed a complaint against him, leading to his discipline. Following that, the complainant alleges that a police lieutenant, who was a friend of the disciplined officer, filed retaliatory complaint against the complainant with the department's EEO office, claiming that the complainant was in violation of EEO regulations. This complainant was allegedly sexually harassing the other dispatcher, asking via text messages or sent messages whether he was gay and why he didn't want to date her. DIG found that the lieutenant did not intend to file a formal complaint, but was merely answering questions from the EEO officer in response to an inquiry by the EEO. In any case, there were reasonable grounds to believe that the complainant may have violated EEO policy by sending inappropriate messages via the CAD system. There's no evidence that the lieutenant was motivated by their relationship with the dispatcher, and the DIG recommended closing this case with a finding of unfounded concerning police misconduct. We agreed with the DIG's finding, and so I moved to accept the DIG's finding of unfounded in case 2024-0333.
May I have a second? Thank you. Any questions?
It's a complicated case.
I was going to say all the complainants complaining.
Well,
It was-
and you had two dispatchers and a police lieutenant. Yeah. This case 2024, this is the last case, -0362. The complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus alleging misconduct by Columbus police officer. The complaint stemmed from the officer working a crime scene. The complainant alleged the officer pushed him for no reason. The Columbus DIG investigation consisted of a review of body-worn camera, a complainant interview, a review of the Columbus Police Department directives. The investigation found no misconduct by the police officer. The officer, at least according to the body-worn camera, did not push the complainant. The officer escorted the complainant out of a crime scene after telling him he needed to leave the taped-off area. He refused to leave. The officer was within policy to escort the complainant outside the crime scene. Therefore, the DIG recommended the allegation against the officer be closed as unfounded. We agree, and so we move in case 2024-0362 to accept the DIG's finding of unfounded.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? Okay.
That's it.
Thank you, Pastor Nathan. I think that was a record for how quickly we had the recitations. We've got open motions and seconds on the following cases: 2023-0235, 2024-0045, plus an additional IG allegation that was sustained on that case. We've also got case numbers 2024-0118, 2024-0201, 2024-0209, 2024-0215, also with a separate recommendation that is repeated about changing BWC policy, 2024-0333, and 2024-0362. All in favor of accepting those as recommended, please raise your hands. Motions carry unanimously. Thank you. All right, Board Member Younger, turning it over to you.
On December 6th, this is case number 2023-1840. On December 6th of 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus, DIG, alleging police misconduct by a CPD officer. The complainant alleged that an officer came to her job to transport a female juvenile and was disrespectful when he said to her, "You are wasting my time. We are not a taxi service." The DIG investigation consisted of BWC, CAD information, a telephone interview with the complainant, an in-person interview with the involved officer, and the review of applicable CPD directives. The investigation revealed that the officer made a statement made the statement to the juvenile. However, the complainant was not present during the entirety of the officer's interaction with the juvenile. The review of the BWC showed that the officer asked the juvenile 3 times how CPD could help her, and the juvenile stood there unresponsive each time she was asked. This was when the officer made the statement, "You are wasting my time. We are not a taxi service." The officer's manner and tone were observed on the BWC, and it did not appear to be disrespectful. The officer continued to communicate with the juvenile to build rapport. Then he transported her to Huckleberry House. The officer's actions were within CPD directives and policies and procedures. Therefore, the DIG recommends that this allegation against the officer be closed as exonerated, since he did make the statement. Our review committee discussed this, and we concurred with the findings of the IG. So at this time, we move to accept the findings of the IG.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions?
Case number 2023-1876. On December 12, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the DIG regarding alleging misconduct by a CPD officer. He alleged that the complainant alleged that he was being harassed by the officer through incidences that occurred on September 8th of 2023, November 24th of 2023, and December 11th of 2023. The DIG's investigation consisted of a telephone interview with the complainant, a review of all of the BWC data, a review of the GPS, a review of CAD data, and an interview of the witness officer, also an interview of the focus officer, and a review of the CPD directives. After reviewing the evidence, the investigation found no evidence of any substance to the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it is recommended as unfounded. So, as looking at these 3 allegations, as to 9/8 of 2023, this was not addressed by the IG because it was outside of the 90-day jurisdiction rule. So that leaves us with 11/24 and 12/11. The 11/24/23, the first stop was a stop sign violation. So the stop was for, there was odor of marijuana, and the stop was conducted as a narcotics investigation. So that was within CPD policy and procedure. The second stop was on 12/11 of 23. The BWC showed, and the interview of the officers concurred, that he was dispatched on a run between 6:30 and 7:30, and he was not with this complainant. He was on another run. So it did not, didn't fit the complaint. And that's, so we reviewed it with the committee, and we found that we concurred with the IG, and we move at this time to accept the findings of the IG.
Second, please.
Second.
Any questions? Okay.
As to case number 2024-0008, on January 2nd of 2024, the complainant filed a complaint with the Department of the Inspector General alleging excessive use of force. The complainant alleged that, 1, an officer ordered her into the apartment that she did not reside in, and then ordered her to move, and then number 2, manhandled her into a wall. The DIG's investigation consisted of review of BWC, CAD, and a review of the use of force report from this incident. Also, an in-person review of the focus officer and a review of CPD directive. The investigation revealed, upon review of the BWC, revealed that the officer asked the complainant to please step inside the apartment that she was standing directly in front of. The complainant was non-compliant with the officer's command to step aside. This was followed by the officer's action, which was use of level 1 force, which was a shove, to clear the hallway for officers coming behind him who had a violent offender in custody. The officer's action, he was trying to clear the hallway because of the other officers coming through, and he simply asked her to step out of the way and into the apartment where the door was open. The officer's action was deemed to be reasonable by the chain of command review and within division policy. The Columbus DIG concurs with the chain of command review of the level 1 use of force, which was deemed to be within policy. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends allegation 1 and 2 against the officer be closed as unfounded. Our committee reviewed, we concur with the IG, and we move to accept the finding of the IG. Case number 2024-0011. On January the 2nd of 2024, there was a complaint made with the DIG. It alleged that CPD officer, the complaint alleged that, number one, CPD officer was not wearing his BWC, grabbed his arm, and forced him outside the bar. And, wait a minute, I'm sorry. The complaint alleged, number one, an officer not wearing a body-worn camera approached him, grabbed his arm, and forced him outside the bar. Number two, the officer stated the complainant would be charged with criminal trespass. And number three, the officer stated the complainant would be charged with assault. The investigation consisted of an interview with the complainant, an interview with the officers involved, statements from both bouncers at the bar, and a review of the CPD policy and procedures. The investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. The officer did approach him, approached him, grabbed his arm, and forced him outside the bar, nor that the officer stated that he would charge him with assault. Therefore, it is recommended that 1 and 3 be closed as unfounded. The investigation revealed the officer did inform the complainant, due to already being asked to leave the premises and failing to do so, that he could be charged with criminal trespass. The officer operated within CPD policy and procedures, and therefore it is recommended that the allegation number 2 be closed as exonerated. We reviewed and we concur with the IG. We move to accept the findings of the IG at this time.
May I just ask a question? What was the evidence in as much as there was no body-worn camera?
Yes, an officer not wearing, okay. There were officers' interviews, the biggest thing was, the evidence was this. There was an interview with Officer S and Officer D. They both denied having contact with the complainant. And in addition, officer, even though the one officer was not, since this was special duty, he still was wearing his BWC.
Oh, he was.
But this one here was not in the vicinity of the interaction, and stated he. But the important thing was that they talked to the bouncers, the 2 bouncers. So they did interview the officers. The BWC was not dispositive of this incident, but what was dispositive was the fact that the DIG talked with both bouncers via email. And after following up with them to confirm the officers they confirmed the officer statements. Both statements from the bouncers confirmed Officer D's statements regarding the incident. Both bouncers denied that the Officer D, the one at issue, had any physical contact with the complainant. Okay.
Okay, we've got an open motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
And let's see, next, 2024-0252. On February 20th, 2024, the complainant filed a complaint with the IG alleging misconduct by a CPD officer. The complaint stemmed from an officer responding to an incident regarding a neighbor dispute. The complainant alleged that the officer did not handle the call to her resident professionally by the way the officer spoke to her, and stated that the officer just was not professional at all. Specifically, the complainant's allegation stemmed from how the officer responded to her regarding the neighbor's dispute and how the officer explained the neighbor's expression of their First Amendment rights. The DIG's investigation consisted of BWC footage, an interview with the complainant, an interview with the focus officer, a review of the CAD, a review of all the applicable directives. The investigation found that the officer's explanation regarding the complainant's neighbor's expression of their First Amendment right was not unprofessional. Based on how the incident was dispatched, the officer was within CPD policy for how the officer handled the incident. Therefore, the DIG recommends that the officers be closed as unfounded. This dispatch came over as a 1016. Officer tried to talk to the neighbor. The neighbor wasn't at home. The neighbor, and the officer tried to explain to the complainant that individuals about First Amendment rights. He was per the BWC, he was trying to talk with him and build a rapport with him. Our review committee reviewed it, and after reading everything, we agreed with the IG. There was nothing. He seemed to be very professional. So we move at this time to accept the findings of the IG.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any questions?
Oops, excuse me. Next, 2024-0343. The complainant filed a complaint with the IG regarding misconduct of a CPD officer. This allegation stemmed from a traffic stop when the complainant fled from the vehicle on foot, and the officer proceeded to pursue this complainant. The complainant alleged that the arresting officer used excessive force on her and that she was manhandled. The DIG's investigation consisted of review of the BWC footage, a complainant interview, an interview of the focus officer, a review of the use of force report from this particular incident, and a review of the applicable CPD directives. The investigation found that the officer's action involving use of force at the time of the arrest was within CPD policy, and the use of force was not excessive. Additionally, CPD's chain of command had already completed their investigation by the time the Inspector General received this complaint. The chain of command found the officer's force to be reasonable and within division policy. The DIG concurred with the chain of command's findings. Therefore, they found the actions against the officer to be unfounded. The foot chase there was a foot chase, and the foot chase consisted of the complainant jumping over a fence. She fled on foot. She slipped out of her cuffs, resisted arrest, bit the officer, and the officer never, per BWC, used any unnecessary force. No taser was used. And the resisting was epic. Our review committee discussed and agreed with the findings of the IG. We move at this time to accept the findings of the Inspector General.
May I have a second? Any questions?
And I think, yeah, this is the last one. 2024-0082. On January 17th, 2024, the complainant filed a complaint with the DIG regarding alleging police misconduct. The complainant made 3 allegations. She alleged that the officer did not properly investigate the incident and did not complete the traffic crash report. Number 2, the officer did not perform a field sobriety test on the driver that struck her vehicle, who disclosed to the officer that he had been drinking. And number 3, she was treated unfairly by the officer due to her race. The DIG investigated this using BWC, CAD, a review of the Licking County Court Registrar information, telephone interview of the complainant, in-person interview of the focus officer, and review of CPD directives. Regarding allegation number 1, the officer did not properly investigate this incident and did not complete a traffic crash report. The investigation confirmed this allegation. The investigation found evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation, and the matter violated CPD policies, procedures, and/or law. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation against this officer be closed as sustained. This officer, it looks like, let's see here, has been on the force, the focus officer has been on the force for 3 years. As it pertains to allegation number 2, the officer did not complete field sobriety tests of the at-fault driver, even though the information available to the officer would indicate that they should be done. The investigation found evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation and suggests the driver may still be impaired an hour after the complainant's incident, which violated CBD policies, procedures, and/or law. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation against the officer be closed as sustained. As to allegation number 3, the allegation against Officer K that she was treated unfairly due to her race, the investigation found no evidence that substantiated this allegation made by the complainant. Therefore, it is recommended that number 3 be closed as unfounded. The Inspector General sustained both of them, number 1 and number 2, did not found number 3 to be unfounded. And our review committee reviewed this and found the actions of the officer to be so egregious. In this case, he put an impaired driver back on the road to be picked up by another jurisdiction within the hour and to be charged with OVI by that jurisdiction. And the OVI driver even told the officer he did not give him any tests, and he did not even do field tests. And the OVI driver even told the officer, that he had been drinking, and he put that driver back on the road to be picked up within the hour, and he could have hurt somebody. So our committee was just appalled by this. We feel that somehow this should be followed, that this officer should be retrained, or we just can't say enough about how disgusted we were with this officer's behavior. And I know that we can't really be specific about what to do, but this would be one where positive corrective action will not be sufficient. Do you think that we should, I need some guidance here, should we bring this particular officer in and have a hearing? Is that what we should do?
I mean,
I don't know.
the purpose for the hearing would be after the IG has done the review, the investigation, and you've read the report, you still feel like there's more information out there, like you don't feel comfortable making a decision on either approving or going against what the IG has found. So, that's not what it sounds like here. So, the hearings the purpose of hearings is to gather more information or gather more evidence, or if there was maybe someone that the IG tried to interview that they couldn't get a hold of, but you're like, well, let's try one more time and bring them in for a hearing so we can talk with them. Like, that's really the purposes for the hearing. In terms of how strongly you feel about the matter, that depends on how we word that when it gets forwarded over to the police.
Well, he didn't seem to understand when, I'm not certain, when to fill out a collision report. And when asked by the Inspector General as to, would you have done anything differently here? He goes, well, maybe I would have done Fields. It just seemed that I'm not certain that he understands the egregiousness, the problem with his actions, or that he might do it again. So maybe if he were brought in, he would realize that.
And you just want to be careful not to blur the lines of what the role of the board is.
That's right. That's why I'm
And so the recommendation for retraining, in that area is something that I believe is well within your authority to do that.
Are we allowed to do that?
You can make a recommendation about retraining, sure.
Or corrective action by training.
I think what's being forwarded to the police is you're just giving like your decisions, like we substantiate, but there's nothing to say you can't recommend, you can put some explanation type language in there saying, based on our review, we're troubled by this, we feel that the officer still doesn't understand the nature of the problem or the seriousness of the violation. We think that it's, we strongly believe that he should be retrained. Language like that you can put in the recommendation.
Okay. All right. So I'll need some help here. Okay. So,
Too about lives at risk, things of that nature.
all right. So,
And again, if your recommendation is going to put any of that kind of language in and you want me to review it for sufficiency, I'm happy to do that.
okay, should I do it now or should I wait and write it later?
Yeah, I don't think, that's a really good question in terms of normally what is being voted on is just substantiate, is going along with what the IG, but if you're going to craft something a little bit more like above and beyond that, you want to
Absolutely.
make sure that the rest of the board is in agreement with that language.
Okay.
So, I don't know whether it's something where you table it till July to be able to kind of formulate the language that you want and let the board review it ahead of time, or whether you want to just kind of shoot from the hip and do it today.
Would the recommendation just be that this specific officer also be retrained on field sobriety test or something about traffic stops
Yeah.
related to OVI?
You could just keep it generic and do it today if you wanted to, just saying, that the board's troubled by this, that the officer doesn't seem to understand the concern here, or the lapse in judgment or the lapse in following training, and we strongly believe he should be retrained in these areas.
It was really egregious, the conversation he had with the impaired driver. And then he didn't seem to understand the procedure. The person told him that he was on probation and didn't even check to see what he was on probation for. And he said, my probation officer told me to call him right away if I got arrested. So the conversation was just unbelievable. This officer had no idea about the criminal justice system or anything. So maybe I should craft something. It was just the conversation between the officer and the impaired driver was just really bad.
Okay.
So,
maybe we'll hold open this one for a vote in July then. I wouldn't want to push it too much further just because we're on our own clock for how quickly we're getting through.
okay. Maybe, are you going to take a break?
Sure,
Okay, maybe I can craft something real quick during break?
sure.
Okay.
We'll go ahead then and we'll hold open 2024-0082 unless anyone has any further questions on that case.
I do, actually. And this is for the IG. I got a lot of questions for you today. Would it be possible, the last few cases that we have reviewed, the officers or the focus officers have had 3 years or less with the division. Would it be possible if I know the reports and you have all the information, you could just do a sort so that we can see how many allegations we're reviewing with officers with like 3 years or less or 5 years or less, so we can see, because I think there might be something there, just based off of the trends that we have been reviewing. The other thing this is not for the IG, but just for all of us to think about as it pertains to this case. I just want to make everyone aware that sometimes this is how implicit biases work. There was an allegation, a third allegation, that I think the complainant was treated unfairly due to her race, and that allegation came back as unfounded. Sometimes when people have implicit biases, we see differential treatment in terms of how we treat each other. And whether or not we have evidence to substantiate that, the fact that this officer did not provide a field sobriety test and allowed a drunk driver to go back out onto the road, and this person did say they felt as though they were treated differently, I don't think that's something that we should take lightly, and I don't know how or what the investigation consisted of to look into that, but I definitely think that that's something that we should be mindful of when conducting investigations. That's all.
All right, so we will come back to 2024-0082 after the break, but before the break, we'll vote on the other cases that had no additional questions. So we have pending motions and seconds on case number 2023-1840, 2023-1876, 2024-0008, 2024-0011, 2024-0252, and 2024-0343. All in favor of accepting those motions as made, please raise your hands. Okay, motions carry, and we will now take a 10-minute break. All right, while we await Board Member Younger returning with some proposed language, I just wanted to give an update that some of the issues that we are going to be working on, that Stephanie has already got in the works. We mentioned having someone come in and give us an update on FOP contract language and any specific terms that impact the board. Also creating the policy recommendation letter template so that we can then send a request specifically asking for updates on all our policy recommendations, of which Stephanie already has all of those. So we know what they are. It's just a matter of plugging those in. And then, due to Dr. Jones's suggestion, having internal affairs discipline overview for the board so that we can have kind of an update, a refresher, especially for board members who weren't here the last time we heard about kind of what the discipline looks like and what the options are in the process for that. So with that, I will turn it back over to Board Member Younger for an update on language for the motion on 2024-0082.
Okay. Our review committee, back to 2024-0343, yes. So our review committee reviewed this and discussed it.
I think it's 0082, not 0343.
Oh, forgive me.
It's okay.
Okay, I'm a little bit discombobulated here. Okay, so our review committee reviewed it, and at this time, we will concur with the Department of the Inspector General as to allegations 1 and 2, and as to allegation 3, we would sustain that, and we would, the Inspector General found it unfounded as to the racist allegation, but we would sustain it. We would not agree with the Inspector General. And we would also like to add some language to that. We believe that,
I'm sorry, you're moving to sustain the allegation, is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Of
correct.
misconduct?
yes,
Okay.
as to all three. Now, as to this particular officer, the focus officer in this particular case, we feel that there was significant lapse in professional judgment, and his behavior here did put the community at risk because he didn't follow common sense, nor did he follow his training. He put an impaired driver back on the road. This impaired driver was stopped within the hour in Pataskala. This impaired driver had been in an accident when he stopped him, and then he was in a subsequent accident within the hour. And that agency did his job for him by arresting him and getting him off the road. And we recommend substantial training, not only in OVI arrests and procedures, but also in common sense. He needs, I can't say that. I can't even, I just can't get over this.
Go back to kindergarten.
Oh, my Lord. Also, he should be trained in procedure, into what probation department is about, the criminal justice system. And that's,
Do you have a summary bit of language?
I'm going to summarize it.
can you summarize?
Yep, I can do that. Okay.
I guess I can stop there.
Okay. And you also said in just criminal justice procedure as well?
Yes, yes.
You don't want to go too broad.
Yes,
Kind
you're
of narrow
right.
the focus.
Thank you.
Direct your ire in a very specific, directed way.
Yeah, we want to laser it.
Laser.
Yeah. Maybe Fourth Amendment, but also in like thorough. Okay, almost there.
Thank you so much for helping.
Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm going to officially word the motion like this. Subcommittee 3 motions to accept the recommendations on allegations 1 and 2 as written, but as to allegation 3, they would move to sustain the third allegation. In addition, due to the significant lapse in professional judgment in the officer's behavior, which put the community at risk by his not following training and putting an impaired driver back on the road, resulting in a subsequent accident while driving under the influence, the committee moves to also recommend substantial training, not only in OVI arrest and procedure, but also in thorough Fourth Amendment jurisprudence. Does that work?
That's beautiful.
Okay. All right, that's the official motion language. May I have a second?
Second.
Perfect. Any other questions? All right. All in favor of accepting that motion as written, please raise your hands. Okay.
And do we need to raise our hand on their sustaining of the, they did not accept the DIG's finding on allegation 3. Did we vote on that?
We did vote on it. I wrapped it in because it's not a separate allegation. It's
Okay.
just us coming to a different conclusion than the IG.
I see.
I kept it as
Okay,
one motion.
Okay.
Yep, no, nice question, though. Thank you.
Now, do I have one more?
Nope.
Nope.
You got them all?
You're
I'm
done.
finished? Thank you.
You are finished, thank you. All right. In light of, we do have the chief coming next month with a list of questions already provided to her. We've also had some subsequent issues pop up that we've talked about that I believe she will be covering in her address. Does anyone have anything else for the good of the order? All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
All right, motion adjourned. Thank you all.
Strickland cases. Is he the only one on his team?